Mike, check 1 2 1 2. It's the Y2K collector. And many people take this approach to collecting where it seems like only expensive games matter. They only really care about the heavy hitting games, the games that are the rarest, the games that are most expensive, the games that are the most difficult to find. And on YouTube, those games tend to be glamorized a whole lot. Those are the games that you will see in the thumbnail. Those are the games that you will see rack up hundreds of thousands of views. And it makes sense, right? It definitely makes sense because people like to view things that they may not necessarily see that often in the wild, or they may not see that often, maybe even in their area, because they don't live in one of those places that just has a lot of game selection diversity. We know the most common types of games that you're going to see in most places, right? Nintendo is probably the most prevalent. You're going to run into Nintendo in almost any game store that you go to across America. You're bound to find some Wii games. You're definitely going to find Switch, obviously, because that's the most modern console. But when you think about retro, you're probably going to see Wii U, maybe some Super Nintendo or some Nintendo. Those are the things that you're going to see. But it's very uncommon that you see like perhaps a rare Dreamcast game, or maybe it's really rare that you'll see a Turbo Graphics game, right? Or you may not see a game for the PC Engine or for the Neo Geo. These are more of the titles and types of games that you would see when you get into a more diverse area. Usually, sometimes you'll see those in a big city, or if you happen to be in an area where there is a mom and pop game store that concentrates on having that type of diversity, because they have owners who maybe go to conventions or travel to different parts of the company to source these types of games, then you're going to see a lot of that stuff. But a lot of times there's a lot of emphasis put on rare and expensive games. And it's funny because there are so many games that are rare and expensive that a lot of people don't know about because they're not the ones that are often glamorized on YouTube. For the most part, what we often hear talked about the most when it comes to rare and expensive games are the Pokemon games, right? So Pokemon Emerald and Pokemon Box and Pokemon Gale of Darkness. Those are the games that are often kind of glamorized and talked about, and it almost feels like you don't have a real collection unless you have some type of rare Pokemon game, Fire Red or Omega Ruby, so on and so forth. So Pokemon is the one that you often hear about. A lot of times after that, what you'll hear about are some of the more rare GameCube games. So Gotcha Force and Chibi Robo and all those types of games that you often hear YouTubers talk about. But the reality of it is that your game collection can be top notch and killer without having a whole bunch of expensive games. Your game collection can definitely mean a lot more to you in some ways than it would to someone else. And here we have a prime example of that, right? So I recently acquired a copy of Battle Arena Toshinden as well as a copy of Battle Arena Toshinden 2. Now, these two games do mean a lot to me, mainly because Battle Arena Toshinden was the first game that I ever played for the PlayStation back in like 94 or 95, I can't remember. I was really young at the time, and my brother had just gotten our first Sony PlayStation. And I remember just seeing all the characters. The one who stands out the most to me is Rungo, because he has that big old bat. And I just remember seeing that game, watching my brother play that, and for the first time in my house, seeing a console that rendered graphics in 3D. Looking at something like that back in the early 90s was truly revolutionary. I know we look at these PlayStation graphics today and we scoff because of how amazing the ray tracing and the AI assisted, graphics generators look on consoles like the PlayStation 5 Pro and so on and so forth. But back in the day, back in the 90s, this was revolutionary technology, and it changed the way we saw video games and even the way we played them. Now, me personally, I did not like the transition from 2D graphics to 3D. Even back then, I didn't like it because while yes, it was new, while yes, it was very interesting to see games in 3D, I still thought that the graphics looked ugly back then. It was revolutionary and it was like mind-blowing to see how games could come out in this way, but I just wasn't attracted to it. So even throughout the lifespan of like the fifth generation, when it comes to consoles like PlayStation and Sega Saturn and N64. The Nintendo 64, I'm going to backtrack for a second. The only console that I could stomach in terms of 3D graphics in the fifth generation was the Nintendo 64, actually. And that was primarily because most of the games that we were playing on the N64 were developed by Nintendo, and Nintendo was going to make sure that they brought the best out of that console. There were other games that came out on the N64, 3D based games that just sucked because it was still fifth generation 3D rendering, which was just horrible. But I'm digressing. The point of the matter is that while these two games are not expensive by any means, even Battle Arena Toshinden 2, you might see this long box and think, wow, that's a $30, $40 game, when on the contrary, this is just a $20 game. Not all long box games are that expensive, and not all long box games are rare. But it just so happens that Battle Arena Toshinden 2, this is the copy that I got that came in the long box, and Battle Arena Toshinden actually had its own long box. It was a jewel case long box, as a matter of fact. And I just remember having both of these games, and these mean a lot to me. Now, they're not rare, they're not expensive, but they are good games. And this is just an example of something that you need to take into consideration, or not that you need to. I'm not telling you how to collect or what you can do, or what you should do, but it's something that you just may want to consider when you're thinking about your killer versus filler. As you build your collection, you may want to consider that, because not everything needs to be rare and expensive. And if you take this I only collect rare games approach, you could be missing out on some really cool stuff, on a lot of opportunities for games that may open you up to a whole new genre or a whole new world of gameplay. And you definitely don't want to shortchange yourself like that, especially if you're just starting off with building your collection. So I thought that this was a very interesting topic to talk about. And it's one that comes to mind because even I myself have recently acquired a lot of heavy hitting games during the month of December. If you look at the wall here, pretty much all of the games that you see here, with the exception of Blood Will Tell, Rule of Rose, Silent Hill Origins, Silent Hill Shattered Memories, Silent Hill 4, those were 4 games that were picked up during the month of December. And these aren't games that I think are extremely rare. I think you can find copies of Silent Hill, and Rule of Rose is probably more rare for sure, but like the Silent Hill games, I think you could find those. Nevertheless, these are more on the expensive side, right? Same thing with the Xbox. You got games like Otogi and Otogi 2 and Spike Out Battle Street, some of the more expensive games, but the buck doesn't stop there, right? Because right next to that, you have some other games like Spawn and R-Type Final and The Bouncer, games that are not super expensive. I think having a little bit of diversity in your collection will go a long way. And while yes, some of the more rare and expensive games are out there, doesn't mean that that's all your collection needs to be made up of. But let me know what you think about this. I think it's very interesting. And I also think that there is some correlation between games that are more expensive and games that are more fun. There is a correlation there, which is justifiable. If the game is more fun, it means it's more desirable. If it's more desirable, more people want it, and then it just boils down to supply and demand, and then that's where you see the prices tend to shoot up. But I'm interested to know your thoughts on this. Let me know down in the comments. It's the Y2K Collector. Hopefully you enjoyed the first day of the year. I did a lot of stuff. I did some cooking, I did some walking, and now I'm about to go hit that gym. Hopefully you get your fitness on, and I'll catch you in the next video. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.